The transmission gave out 30 miles past Carthage. Should have seen it coming. That grinding noise had been getting worse for 200 miles. But when you're down to your last $40 and your mother's dying in a hospital bed 3 states away, you don't stop for things like transmissions. I coasted the truck onto the shoulder and sat there for a minute, hands still on the wheel. The gauge cluster was dark except for the temperature needle, which had finally stopped its slow climb toward the red. Through the bug-splattered windshield, I could see the town spreading out below the overpass. Another cluster of buildings nobody remembered the name of, strung along a state highway like beads on a wire. The boxes in the truck bed shifted when I climbed out. Everything I owned back there, clothes, tools, a coffee maker that leaked, photo albums I hadn't opened in 3 years. The tarp had come loose somewhere around Memphis, and now half my life was wet from yesterday's rain. I retied the corners and started walking. The grade down into town was steeper than it looked. My work boots found every piece of loose gravel, and twice I had to catch myself on the guardrail. The air smelled like hot asphalt and something chemical, probably from whatever factory was pumping gray smoke on the horizon. A semi roared past, close enough that the wind rocked me sideways. The driver laid on his horn, the sound Dopplering away into nothing. By the time I reached the first stoplight, sweat had soaked through my shirt. The cross street was lined with dollar stores and payday loan places, their neon signs dark in the afternoon sun. A woman pushing a shopping cart full of aluminum cans didn't look up when I passed. I found a payphone outside a boarded-up gas station. The receiver was sticky with something I didn't want to think about. "St. Joseph's Hospital," the voice said after 6 rings. "Room 317, please." One moment. The hold music was some piano thing, tinny through the old speaker. I watched a dog nose through garbage while I waited. "Hello?" My mother's voice came through weak, like she was talking from the bottom of a well. "Hey, Ma." "Owen? Where are you, honey?" "Just between jobs, heading to the next one. You don't have to do this. We'll figure something out." I closed my eyes. We'd had this conversation a dozen times. The farm was gone. Dad was gone. Not dead, just gone. And the bills kept coming, each one stamped with red letters that meant the same thing in every language. "I'm fine, Ma. How are you feeling today?" "Oh, you know. They've got me on some new medicine. Makes me dizzy, but the pain's better." A lie. I could hear it in the spaces between her words, the little catches where she was fighting not to cough. "That's good. Listen, I should have some money to send by Friday. Owen, I'll call again tomorrow, okay? Love you." I hung up before she could argue. The quarter clinked into the phone's guts. The want ads at the grocery store were mostly torn strips of paper with phone numbers. I copied down anything that looked like day labor, warehouse work, moving crews, construction cleanup. The girl at customer service let me use their phone, but most numbers just rang or went to full voicemail boxes. On the 7th call, someone picked up. "Little's Laundromat." "Yeah, I'm calling about the help wanted sign. Can you work nights?" "Sure. Come by after 6. Industrial District, Randall Street." The line went dead. I got directions from the grocery store clerk and started walking again. The sun was lower now, throwing long shadows across the empty lots and chain-link fences. The industrial district turned out to be 6 blocks of warehouses and machine shops, most of them dark behind their security gates. Little's all-night laundromat sat between a welding supply store and an auto salvage yard. The building was low and flat, painted institutional green sometime in the last century. The windows glowed fluorescent white against the darkening sky. I pushed through the glass door into a wall of humid air that smelled like detergent and hot lint. The machines were older than anything I'd seen still running, white metal boxes with coin slots that looked like they took real silver dollars. Half of them churned away despite the place being empty. "You the one who called?" The voice came from behind the change machine. I walked around to find an old man counting quarters into paper rolls. He was thin in that way some old people get, like they're slowly evaporating. His cardigan had patches on the elbows, and his glasses were thick enough to use for starting fires. "Yes, sir. Owen James." He looked up at me, eyes huge behind the lenses. "Jerry Little. You worked laundromats before?" "No, sir, but I'm a quick learner. Done warehouse work, construction. Doesn't matter." He slid a laminated sheet across the counter. "Can you follow rules?" "Of course. Read that. Tell me if you can follow them." The paper was yellow with age. The lamination bubbled at the corners. At the top, someone had typed night shift protocols in letters that had probably been black once but were now the color of old blood. The first rule seemed normal enough. 1. Upon beginning overnight shift, 11 p.m., 7 a.m., switch sign on door from open to attendant on duty. I nodded. Sure, makes sense to let people know someone's here. Jerry Little said nothing, just kept rolling quarters. I read the second rule. 2. Remove all fabric softener sheets from premises before midnight. Store in locked cabinet and break room. Why would I? Just read. The third rule made me pause. 3. Stock quarter machine with specific denominations. 40% pre-1965 quarters, silver, 60% standard. Some customers will pay with currency that appears wrong. Accept it. Make change as normal. I looked up. Jerry was watching me now, those magnified eyes unblinking. What kind of wrong currency? The kind you'll recognize when you see it. Keep reading. 4. Machines 7 through 12 must run empty cycles between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Do not interrupt these cycles. Do not look inside during operation. 5. Some customers wash items other than clothing. Do not comment. Do not observe. Industrial machines accommodate all needs. My mouth had gone dry. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the back, a washer shifted into its spin cycle with a sound like grinding bones. This is a joke, right? Do I look like I joke, Mr. James? I didn't answer. He didn't look like he'd joked once in his 70-odd years. Finish reading. The rest of the rules were worse. Instructions for handling customers who entered through walls instead of doors. Procedures for when the phone rang but no one spoke. A detailed chart showing which cleaning chemicals to use for non-standard biological remnants. The last line wasn't numbered. Failure to follow protocols will result in immediate termination. Jerry slid another paper across the counter, a standard employment form. Overnight shift, 11 to 7. Minimum wage plus 50 cents. Cash, end of each shift. You want it or not. I thought about the $40 in my wallet. About the truck broken down on the overpass. About my mother's voice, thin as tissue paper through the payphone speaker. When do I start? Tonight. Be here at 10:45 for orientation. He went back to rolling quarters. Conversation over. I folded the employment form into my pocket and headed for the door. Mr. James? I turned back. One more thing. He reached under the counter and pulled out a black ledger, the kind with a cloth cover and sewn binding. You'll want to study this before your shift. The book was heavier than it looked. I opened it to the first page where someone had written in careful block letters, regular customers, night shift updated 10/15/23. Below that was a list of names, each with notes in different handwriting. Some had stars next to them, some were circled in blue pen, and some, maybe a dozen, were highlighted in red ink so fresh it seemed to pulse under the fluorescent lights. Margaret Chen, Tuesdays, 1 a.m., washes vintage dresses. Safe. Thompson, no first name. Irregular schedule. Pays in coins. Check dates. Unpredictable. The wet man. Do not engage. Do not make eye contact. Industrial machine 9 only. Extreme caution. I flipped through page after page, each entry more disturbing than the last. Some customers were described by their appearance. Woman with backwards hands. Child who speaks in radio static. Others just had warnings. Will offer to share food, decline politely. Or, if singing begins, go to break room and lock door. This can't be real. Jerry looked up from his quarters. 10:45, Mr. James, don't be late. I left the laundromat in a daze. The black ledger clutched against my chest. The sky had gone full dark while I was inside, and the industrial district felt different now. Shadows moved in ways that had nothing to do with the sparse streetlights. Somewhere in the distance, a sound like laughter echoed off the warehouse walls. I'd taken stranger jobs, I told myself. Cleaned up worse messes, dealt with worse people. But as I walked back toward town, the ledger seemed to grow heavier with each step. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just signed up for something that no amount of minimum wage plus 50 cents would make worth it. That first night, I showed up at 10:45 sharp with Jerry's ledger tucked under my arm. The old man was still behind the counter, same patched cardigan, counting what looked like the same stack of quarters. He glanced up through those thick glasses. Good. You're punctual. He slid a ring of keys across the counter. These open everything except the supply closet. That stays locked between midnight and dawn. I pocketed the keys. their weight heavier than seemed right for just metal. What's in the supply closet? Nothing you need to worry about if you follow the rules. Jerry stood, joints popping. Come on, let me show you the rounds. He walked me through the basics. How to refill the detergent dispensers, where to find extra quarters for the change machine, which circuit breaker controlled what. Normal stuff mostly. Then he showed me the break room in back, a cramped space with a coffee maker, mini fridge, and metal cabinet with a padlock. Fabric softener sheets go in here before midnight, he said, tapping the cabinet. Every single one. Don't miss any. The way he said it made my skin crawl, but I just nodded. At 11 on the dot, Jerry headed for the door. Remember, follow the protocols. Don't deviate. He paused at the threshold. And Owen, whatever you see tonight, whatever walks through that door, just do the job. Then I was alone. The first hour passed quiet enough. I switched the door sign from open to open like the rules said, though it made no damn sense. Collected all the fabric softener sheets from the dispensers, 23 total, and locked them in that cabinet. Mixed the quarters in the change machine, making sure the pre-1965 silvers were distributed right. Busy work that kept my hands moving while my brain tried not to think too hard about why any of it mattered. Then midnight hit. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice. The washing machines that had been running, 7 of them, all empty, stopped mid-cycle. The silence pressed against my eardrums like I'd gone underwater. The front door chimed. 3 figures shuffled in wearing hospital gowns, the thin kind that tie in back. Their skin had that gray-white color of old fish belly, and they moved wrong, too smooth, like they were gliding instead of walking. Each carried a bundle of clothes. I stayed behind the counter, gripping the edge hard enough to leave marks. The ledger had mentioned them. Tuesday midnight regulars, the entry said. Accept items without comment. Do not look at stains directly. They approached single file. The first one, a woman maybe, though her face kept shifting in my peripheral vision, set her bundle on the counter. Dark spots covered the fabric. Blood had to be blood, though it looked too dark, too thick. Wash, she said. Her voice came out wet, like talking through water. I grabbed the bundle without looking straight at it, headed for machine number 7. The fabric felt cold, colder than anything had a right to be in that humid laundromat. I shoved it in, added detergent, started the cycle. When I turned back, the second figure was waiting. Same routine. Bundle on counter, dark stains I didn't examine, into machine 8. The third one handed me what looked like surgical scrubs, the kind my mother's nurses wore. These had handprints all over them in that same too dark blood. Machine 9. They didn't pay. The ledger said they never paid, that it was complimentary service. They just stood there watching the machines fill with water, their gown backs hanging open to show skin that looked like it had been underwater too long. 45 minutes later, the cycles finished. I moved their items to the dryers, trying not to notice how the stains hadn't faded at all. The water in the machines had run clear the whole time, but those dark spots stayed put. They collected their clean but not clean clothes an hour later and shuffled out without a word. The door hadn't even closed when the next one came in. This person, I tried to tell myself, looked like somebody had stretched a shadow into human shape. Thin as paper when it turned sideways, but normal width facing forward. It carried a garbage bag full of clothes that writhed like something alive was inside. I knew before it reached the counter. The ledger had a whole page on this one. The thin man. Machines, 1012 only. Do not touch items directly. Evening, it said, voice like wind through dead leaves. I grabbed rubber gloves from under the counter. Jerry had pointed them out during the tour, and took the bag. The clothes inside moved against my hands, fabric sliding over itself in ways that made my stomach turn. I dumped the whole mess into machine 10 without sorting, slammed the lid, started the cycle. The thin man settled into one of the plastic chairs to wait, folding and unfolding like origami in fast forward. More came as the night wore on. A group of kids appeared between machines 4 and 5. Didn't walk in, just suddenly existed there. Maybe 7 or 8 years old, all wearing different uniforms. Catholic school, public school, even one in what looked like reform school gray. They held out clothes to me, and Christ, I recognized some of them. A Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt I'd owned in 3rd grade, a dress my sister wore to her first communion. Things that had been gone for decades, things that couldn't possibly exist anymore. "Free wash?" the one in Catholic plaid asked. Her eyes caught the light like marbles. I took their impossible clothes, loaded them into separate machines. The ledger said to never mix their items, never ask where they came from. Just wash, dry, return. They waited in a perfect line, not talking, not moving, just watching me work with those glass eyes. By 3 a.m, my hands shook from too much coffee and not enough food. I'd served maybe a dozen customers, each stranger than the last. A man whose clothes dripped seawater even though we were 500 miles from the nearest ocean. A woman who brought in a wedding dress that changed color every time I looked away, something that might have been human once, bringing uniforms from a factory that burned down in the 70s. I was refilling the change machine. The silver quarters kept disappearing faster than the regular ones when I heard movement in the back office. The ledger hadn't mentioned anyone else working nights. I crept to the doorway, peered around the corner. A guy sat hunched over a bank of security monitors I hadn't noticed during Jerry's tour. Young, maybe early 20s, with the kind of pallor that said he hadn't seen sunlight in years. He wore a maintenance uniform with Finn stitched on the pocket. "Coffee's fresh if you want some," he said without looking up. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Didn't know anyone else was here. "Someone's always here." He turned finally, and his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. "Finn Quinn. I do maintenance. Owen James. Just started tonight." "I know." He gestured at the monitors. "I see everything that happens here." The screens showed angles of the laundromat I didn't recognize, views that shouldn't exist based on the building's layout. In one, those kids still stood perfectly still between the machines. In another, something dark and wet lurked just outside the back door. I couldn't finish. "My job," Finn said. "Keep an eye on things. Make sure nothing gets too far out of hand." Jerry doesn't know everything. Finn turned back to the screens. "Bring me coffee every hour, Black. Helps me focus." Something in his voice made me look closer. His hands on the desk were too pale, veins showing blue through paper-thin skin. When he breathed, it seemed more habit than necessity. "You're not..." Again, I couldn't finish. "Not entirely," he agreed. "Not anymore. Got caught between things a few years back. Now I work here." "Caught between what things?" He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. "Living and dying. Turns out there's plenty of gray area if you know where to look. Or if something notices you looking." My mouth went dry. "Something?" "Death," he said simply. "Not the scary skeleton thing. More like management. Middle management, really. Needed someone to keep an eye on places like this, where things get thin, where the wrong sorts might slip through." "And you volunteered?" "Got volunteered." He tapped one of the screens where something with too many arms was trying the back door. "Better than the alternative. At least here I'm useful. Keep the really bad ones out. Make sure the harmless ones get their laundry done." "Harmless," I repeated, thinking of those kids with their impossible clothes. "Relatively speaking." He glanced at his watch. "Speaking of which, you might want to check Machine 9. The wet man's due any minute, and you don't want him using a machine that's already running." I hurried back to the main floor, found Machine 9 just finishing its cycle, moved the clothes, trying not to think about why they felt like skin, to a dryer just as the front door chimed. The wet man stood there dripping salt water onto the linoleum, exactly like the ledger described. I understood then why Finn needed that hourly coffee, why I'd keep bringing it. In a place where the dead washed clothes they died in and children brought shirts from decades past, someone had to keep watch. Someone had to make sure worse things didn't crawl through. Someone caught between living and dying, who could see both sides clear. I'd been closing the laundromat for 3 weeks when I first noticed her. Every morning at 7, right as I flipped the door sign from open to closed, she'd be there across the street, standing beneath that old checks cashed neon sign that flickered between pink and dead gray. Just standing. Not waiting for a bus. The route didn't run that early. Not smoking or checking her phone. Just watching. From that distance, maybe 40 feet through the morning haze, she looked normal enough. Dark hair down to her waist. Some kind of old-fashioned dress, the kind with all those layers my grandmother might have worn to church. Pale skin that caught the stuttering neon when it decided to work. Took me 4 mornings to realize what bothered me about her. See, The laundromat had these big plate glass windows Jerry never got around to replacing after that hailstorm years back. The cracks made everything reflect funny, doubled up and distorted. When I'd turn to lock the door, I'd catch her reflection in the glass. That's when I saw the hole. Not a tear in her dress, not some trick of the light. A hole straight through her middle, big as a dinner plate. I could see the graffitied wall behind her, see that dying neon sign, see everything that should have been hidden by her body. Like someone had taken a core sample right through her torso. First time I saw it, I dropped my keys, spun around fast, but from the front she looked solid as anybody. No hole. Just that woman in her old dress, still as a photograph. Turned back to the glass though, and there it was. That awful emptiness where her stomach and spine should have been. Started checking every morning after that. Direct view. Normal woman. Reflection. Woman with a hole punched through her middle. The kind of thing that should have killed someone instant. Hell, the kind of thing that should have made standing impossible, what with no spine to hold the top and bottom together. But there she stood. Every goddamn morning. Jerry had given me this whole list of closing procedures when I started. Lock the register, empty the lint traps, check the back door twice. Normal stuff mostly, except for the last item on the laminated sheet. Sprinkle iron filings across all entrances before leaving. No exceptions. He'd even shown me where to find them. This big mason jar full of what looked like metal sawdust, kept under the counter next to the spare change rolls. Showed me how much to use too. Not just a pinch, but a good solid line across each threshold. Front door, back door, even that little service entrance nobody used anymore. It's important, Jerry had said, cleaning his thick glasses on his cardigan. Real important you don't skip this step. I'd asked why. Seemed reasonable. Wanting to know why I was throwing metal shavings around like some kind of witch. Keeps things out, was all he said. Then softer like he was embarrassed. Old building like this, you do what works. So I did it, every morning, last thing before leaving. 3 lines of iron filings, dark against the cracked linoleum. By the time I came back for my next shift, they'd always be gone. Swept up by Jerry or Finn or just blown away. But I kept laying them down, because when you work the night shift at a laundromat where dead kids wash their burial clothes, you don't question the procedures that keep worse things away. The woman, Mackenzie, Finn had called her once, real casual like they were old neighbors, never tried to come in, never moved from her spot under that sign, just watched, just waited. 3 weeks of this routine, 3 weeks of good behavior on both sides of the street. Then Mom called. Not Mom directly, she was too sick for that. The nurse at St. Joseph's, the one with the kind voice who always remembered my name. Mom's kidneys were shutting down faster than expected. There was a procedure, experimental but promising. Insurance wouldn't cover it. $3,000 by end of business tomorrow, or they'd have to explore other options. Other options. Christ, what a way to say letting her die. I had $900 saved, cash in a coffee can in my truck, wrapped in plastic against the rain that leaked through the rust holes. $900 from 3 weeks of minimum wage plus 50 cents living on gas station coffee and day-old donuts. Not enough. Not even close. But Western Union was open till 8 in the morning. If I hurried, if I ran, I could wire what I had. Buy some time. Figure out the rest later. Sell the truck. Sell my tools. Sell blood if I had to. I burst through the laundromat door at 7:05, keys jangling, heart hammering. The woman was there across the street, same as always. I locked the door, fumbled with the register, shoved the night's take in the canvas deposit bag. My hands shook so bad I dropped quarters all over the floor. Mom dying, kidneys failing, $3,000. I ran. Deposit bag clutched tight, feet slapping the wet pavement. 2 blocks, 3 blocks, lungs burning in the humid morning air. The Western Union sign glowed yellow in the distance like some kind of promised land. 4 blocks away, breathing like a broken bellows, I remembered the iron filings. Stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. Some guy in a suit cursed and stepped around me. I stood there, deposit bag cutting into my palm, knowing I should go back. Knowing what that empty jar under the counter meant. Mom's kidneys. End of business tomorrow. Other options. One time wouldn't matter. Jerry swept them up every day anyway, so what difference did it make if I skipped once? The woman had stood there 3 weeks without trying anything. She was probably just another weird customer. like the ones who washed clothes that hadn't existed for decades. Harmless, strange, but harmless. I kept walking, got to Western Union right as the clerk was setting up for the day. Wired all $900 to the hospital, paid the fee that ate another $26 I couldn't spare. Walked back slow, telling myself it was fine. One oversight, one mistake. Wouldn't matter. The woman was gone when I passed the laundromat. First time in 3 weeks she wasn't at her post. I told myself that was good. Told myself lots of things on that long walk back to my broken truck. Next night I showed up at 10:45, same as always. Jerry was behind the counter, but he looked older somehow, grayer. He handed me my key ring without meeting my eyes. "Everything all right?" I asked. He just nodded at the back office. "Finn needs coffee, make it strong." But when I got to the office, Finn wasn't there. His monitors, those impossible screens that showed angles that shouldn't exist, displayed nothing but static. Gray snow where there should have been views of the main floor, the alley, that space between the walls where things sometimes moved. His chair was pushed back like he'd stood up fast. The coffee maker was still on, pot full of fresh brew that couldn't have been sitting more than 10 minutes. The steam rising off it looked wrong, too thick, too dark. I checked everywhere. The break room, the supply closet, locked tight as always between midnight and dawn. Even the customer bathroom with its out-of-order sign that had been there so long the tape had gone yellow. No Finn. "Where is he?" I asked Jerry. The old man was back at his quarters, sorting them into rolls with shaking hands. "Don't know. Hasn't been here. His coffee's fresh, still hot. Don't know anything about that." But he did. I could see it in how his shoulders hunched, how he wouldn't look up from those endless quarters. Something had happened. Something bad enough that Jerry, who'd hired me to work alongside the dead without blinking, was scared. I went back to the office thinking maybe I'd missed something. That's when I saw the ledger. That black cloth-bound book full of warnings and rules, all those entries about our regular customers written in different hands across God knows how many years. It was open on the desk, pages ruffled like someone had been flipping through it fast, but whole sections were gone, not torn out. The binding was intact, just absent, like they'd never existed. Specifically the sections marked in red ink, the ones about the really dangerous customers, the ones even Finn watched careful. The ones about things that shouldn't be let in, things that needed keeping out, things that iron filings held at bay according to rules older than the building itself. I touched the page where Margaret Chen's entry should have been, felt nothing but smooth paper where I knew there'd been writing just yesterday. The book was rewriting itself, erasing the warnings we needed most. The static on Finn's monitors flickered. For just a second, I thought I saw a shape in all that gray snow. A woman in an old-fashioned dress, standing very still, standing in a place the cameras had never shown before, standing inside the walls. That's when I knew it in my gut, in my bones, in that cold certainty that comes when you've fucked up past all fixing. The iron filings hadn't been some old superstition. They'd been the only thing keeping her out. And I'd left the door unguarded. Finn was gone. The ledger was breaking down, and somewhere in this building, moving through spaces that shouldn't exist, was a woman with a hole where her heart should be. I'd let her in. The truth hit me all at once, like those moments when you finally understand a simple thing that's been right in front of you. The iron filings weren't keeping Mackenzie out. They were keeping everything else in. I stood in Jerry's empty office, staring at the monitors showing nothing but static. The coffee pot still steamed that wrong kind of steam, too thick and dark. My hands shook as I grabbed the mason jar from under the counter. Maybe half the iron filings left. Not enough, not nearly enough for what I'd done. The laundromat wasn't a business, never had been. It was a processing facility, a holding pen, all those things that came through the night. The hospital gown figures, the thin man, the children with glass eyes. They weren't customers. They were prisoners. The first siren started up around 11:30, then another, then 3 more, all heading different directions. I pressed my face against the front window, watching red and blue lights streak past. The police scanner Jerry kept on the shelf behind the register crackled to life on its own. "All units, we have multiple reports of..." Static swallowed the dispatcher's voice. Then, "Missing from Riverside Elementary." More static. Something moving through the walls at Mercy General. I thought about those children who'd appeared between machines 4 and 5, the ones carrying clothes from decades past. My third-grade Ninja Turtle shirt. Where would they go first? Back to the schools they'd attended, the homes they'd lived in, the hospital-gowned figures. Christ, they'd head straight back to St. Joseph's, wouldn't they? 3 floors up from where my mother lay dying. I ran for the basement stairs. Jerry had shown me down there once during orientation, just long enough to point out the circuit breakers. Nothing else down there you need to worry about, he'd said. But Finn had to be somewhere, and if the monitors in his office weren't working. The wooden steps groaned under my weight. No light switch at the top. Had to feel my way down in the dark, one hand on the rough concrete wall. The air got colder with each step. Not winter cold. The kind of cold that comes from places that haven't seen sunlight in years. At the bottom, faint blue light leaked around stacks of disconnected washing machines. Old models from the 50s and 60s, the kind with wringer attachments. Some still had clothes trapped in the rollers, faded fabric that might have been white once. Finn? My voice came out as a whisper. I followed the blue light through a maze of dead equipment, past dryers with their doors hanging open like mouths, past industrial presses that hadn't moved in decades but still smelled like hot metal. The light got stronger, steadier, not electric, something else. I found him sitting on the concrete floor in a cleared space, his back against a disconnected washer. The blue light came from him, from inside him, glowing through his too pale skin like he'd swallowed a neon sign. "Took you long enough," he said. His voice sounded different, clearer, like static clearing from a radio station. "Jesus, Finn, what? Contract's done." He looked up at me, and his eyes were nothing but blue light. "Death keeps his bargains. I maintained the containment, kept the facility running. Then you broke it. Assignment complete. But they're out there, in town. People are dying." Finn laughed, and it sounded like wind chimes. "People die, Owen. That's what they do. Some just take longer routes than others." The blue light inside him pulsed brighter. I could see through him now, see the washing machine behind him, the concrete wall beyond that. "You can't leave," I said. "You know this place. You know how to stop them." "I know how to contain them. Big difference." He pushed himself up, movements too smooth, too light, like he barely touched the ground anymore. "But you've got about 6 hours until sunrise. After that, they settle into the world, become permanent. Right now, they're still tethered to their routines." "Their routines? Why do you think they came here every night, washing the same clothes over and over?" The blue light started spreading from his skin, filling the air around him like fog. "It's all they remember how to do. The last normal thing before they became whatever they became. Give them their routines, and they'll follow." He was fading now, becoming more light than substance. "Wait, how do I?" The ledger had instructions, real specific ones before it started eating itself. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Each one needs their particular cycle. Temperature, duration, detergent mix. Get it right, they'll come back. Get it wrong. The light contracted, pulled into itself. "Well, hope you remember what you read." Then he was gone. Just gone. No dramatic exit. No final wisdom. The basement plunged into darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hands. I felt my way back to the stairs, climbed them 2 at a time. The scanner upstairs was going crazy, reports from all over town. Something at the elementary school that made children scream. Residents on Maple Street reporting someone walking through their walls. The hospital lockdown alarm blaring in the background of one transmission. 6 hours until sunrise. I grabbed the ledger from the office, flipped through the pages. Most of the red ink entries were gone, but some regular entries remained. Margaret Chen, Tuesdays, 1 a.m., vintage dresses, warm water, light cycle, the thin man, machines 10 through 12 only, cold water, heavy duty, extra rinse. I could remember some of the others. The hospital gown figures never paid because their service was complimentary. They used machines 7 through 9. But what temperature? What cycle? The children, God, the children were the worst. Each one needed a separate machine, specific settings. The Catholic schoolgirl, was it cold water delicate or warm water normal? I started with what I knew for sure. Loaded quarters into the machines. Silver ones in the odd-numbered machines, regular in the evens. Set machine 7 to warm water, normal cycle. Machine 8, same settings. Machine 9. The wet man used machine 9. Always machine 9. But what if the hospital figures came first? Police sirens wailed closer. The scanner crackled. Officer requesting backup at Riverside Elementary. Multiple children reported inside the building after hours. Doors are locked, but they're in the classrooms, just standing there. I had to move faster. Set all 3 machines for the hospital figures, then prepped 10 through 12 for the thin man. Cold water, heavy duty, extra rinse. I remembered that one because I'd done it so many times. The children would need machines 1 through 6. 6 kids, if I remembered right. Catholic schoolgirl in 1, public school boy in 2. My hands moved on muscle memory, setting dials, adding detergent. The familiar motions felt different now that I understood what they meant. This wasn't laundry. This was summoning, calling things back to the only home they remembered. 2 hours until midnight. I'd seen most of them arrive between midnight and 3. If they kept to their schedules even while free. The lights flickered, just once, but I knew that flicker. I turned toward the door. The hospital figures stood in the street, visible through the cracked glass. Still in their gowns, still moving too smooth. They pressed against the window, leaving wet handprints on the glass. I hit the start buttons on machines 7 through 9. Water rushed through the pipes, filling the drums. The figures outside tilted their heads in unison, like dogs hearing a whistle. Then they walked through the door, not opening it, just passing through like smoke. They took their usual positions by the machines, watching the water rise. Their faces almost looked peaceful. Almost. 1 down. God knew how many to go. The scanner burst with static, then all units, emergency at Mercy General, something in the pediatric ward, repeat, something in the children. They'd gone to the hospital. I set up machines 1 through 6 fast as I could remember. Delicate cycle for the Catholic schoolgirl, normal for the boy in public school uniform, quick wash for the one in reform school gray. The others, I guessed. Warm water for all of them. Light detergent. Short cycles. The thin man arrived at 12:30, right on schedule. He stood in the doorway, that paper-thin profile visible for just a second before he turned to face me. His garbage bag of writhing clothes dragged behind him. I pointed to machine 10. He nodded, or maybe just folded forward, and made his way over. I'd already started the cycle. He dumped his clothes in without ceremony, then took his usual seat. 2 for 2. But the children still hadn't come. The scanner kept reporting chaos. Sightings all over town. Margaret Chen at the vintage clothing store, trying on dresses that crumbled at her touch. The color-changing woman at 3 different weddings simultaneously. The seawater man leaving trails through the grocery store seafood section. I kept the machines running. Soon as one cycle finished, I started it again, empty drums spinning, waiting for their occupants. The hospital figures moved their bundles from washers to dryers, then back again. The thin man folded and unfolded in his chair. 3 a.m. came and went. No children. I checked the ledger again. The pages where their entries should have been were smooth, blank. But there, in the margin of another page, I caught a fragment in faded pencil. Children respond to proper invitation only. Invitation? What kind of invitation? Then I remembered. The Catholic schoolgirl always asked for a free wash, every single time. And I always said yes. I ran to the door, pushed it open. The street was empty except for distant sirens, but I knew they could hear me. Things like them always heard what they needed to hear. "Free wash tonight," I shouted into the dark. "Children wash free." Nothing, just wind and the sound of machines spinning behind me. "Free wash," I tried again. "Just like always, bring your clothes." A minute passed, 2, then I saw them, walking down the middle of the street in a perfect line. The Catholic schoolgirl led them, her marble eyes catching the streetlight. Behind her, the others followed in height order. They carried their bundles, my old Ninja Turtle shirt visible in the public school boy's arms. They stopped at the door, waiting. "Free wash?" the girl asked in that voice like broken bells. "Yeah," I said. "Free wash, just like always." They filed past me, each taking their assigned machine. I helped them load their clothes, set the cycles running. They stood in their perfect line, watching the water fill. 4 a.m. Most of them were back. The machines hummed and churned, keeping them anchored, but others still roamed free. Margaret Chen, the seawater man, the woman with backwards hands, too many to count. I kept washing, started new cycles soon as the old ones finished. The entities didn't seem to notice they were washing nothing. Just stood there, watched their machines, went through their routines. 5 a.m. The scanner had gone quiet. Either the situation was under control or it had gotten so bad they'd stopped reporting. I didn't want to know which. I found more iron filings in the supply closet, 3 full jars hidden behind industrial-sized detergent boxes. Started sprinkling them across the doorways while the machines ran. The entities inside didn't react. They were home. First light crept across the sky around 6:30, pale pink like watered-down blood. I stood at the window watching the street. A few more stragglers had returned during the last hour, the woman who spoke backwards, the man with too many fingers. They'd found their machines, settled into their cycles, but not all of them. I could feel it. Some had found new homes, new routines, settled into the world like Finn said they would. 7 a.m. approached. Time to flip the sign, time to close. But as I reached for it, I saw her. Mackenzie stood in her usual spot across the street. Same old-fashioned dress, same dark hair, same hole through her middle that only showed in reflections. She wasn't alone. 3 others stood with her, new ones. A man in a business suit with his throat cut, a woman in a hospital gown, not one of the original 3, a teenager with half his face missing, fresh dead, from last night, from what I'd let loose. They watched me through the window, waiting. I looked at the machines behind me, every single one running, filled with the things I'd managed to call back. The hospital figures folding and refolding their surgical scrubs. The thin man origamiing himself in his chair. The children standing in their eternal line. Then I looked at the sign in my hand. Open on one side, open on the other. Some prisons, I understood then, never really close. I flipped the sign anyway. Habit, routine, the thing that keeps us anchored when everything else falls apart. Mackenzie smiled. I swear she smiled, and turned away. Her new companions followed. They'd be back tonight. They always came back. The machines kept running. The entities kept washing. And somewhere in the basement, in the dark between disconnected washers, a blue light flickered once and went out. I watched her test the barrier that first morning after everything went wrong. Mackenzie stood at the entrance, one pale foot extended toward the fresh iron filings I'd scattered across the threshold. The toe of her Victorian boot stopped about an inch from the metal shavings, hovering there like she was testing bathwater. Her dress rustled in a breeze I couldn't feel, and through the cracked plate glass, I saw that hole through her middle, that dinner plate-sized void where her reflection should have had organs and spine. The barrier held. Her foot pulled back, and she tilted her head at me through the window. Not angry, exactly. More like a cat that finds the birdcage locked. They'd all come back, most of them anyway. The ones that belonged here, that had routines older than my understanding. But Finn was gone. Really gone this time. No blue light flickering in the basement. No pale figure watching monitors in the back office. Just me and the ledger with its missing pages, trying to remember which entity needed what temperature, what cycle, what specific invitation to keep them contained. I thought about calling Jerry, but what would I say? That I'd let them all out because I forgot to sprinkle some iron filings. That I'd been too focused on wiring money to my dying mother to remember the one job that actually mattered. Besides, Jerry had made it clear when he'd shown up that morning. This was my mess now. The way his hands shook when he'd handed over the keys. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew what I'd done. The phone behind the counter rang. Not the supernatural calls the ledger warned about. Those came later, always between 2 and 4, always silent. This was just the regular line, probably someone wondering about drop-off service or asking our hours. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. Little's Laundromat. Owen? My mother's voice, thin and breathless. Honey, they said someone wired money this morning. $900. My hand tightened on the receiver. Behind me, Machine 7 switched to spin cycle, the sound drilling into my skull. Yeah, Ma, that was me. But that's... Owen, that's too much. Where did you... It's fine. I watched Mackenzie through the window. She'd moved to her usual spot under the checks cashed sign, but now she had company. 3 new figures stood with her, fresh from last night's chaos. I've been working, saved it up. The truck job? Different job, night shift at a laundromat. I turned away from the window. Didn't need to see her smile at her new friends. Listen, Ma, about the money. That's gonna be it for a while. Silence on her end. Just her breathing, labored and wet. I can't send more, I said. The job, I can't leave it. Can't even miss a night. Oh, and James, don't you dare feel guilty about... I'm not. The lie came easy. Everything was lies now. It's good work, important work. Just means I'm stuck here for a bit. Machine 9 beeped. The hospital figure in front of it stood with that too smooth motion, started transferring wet clothes to the dryer. The clothes that felt like skin, that left rust-colored water no matter how many times they ran through the cycle. Are you in some kind of trouble? Ma asked. Because if you are, no trouble, just responsibility. I rubbed my face with my free hand. 3 weeks without a full night's sleep was catching up. Sometimes you find work that needs doing, and you're the only one who can do it. Oh, honey. Her voice softened, took on that tone she'd used when I was 8 and trying to explain why I'd gotten in a fight defending some kid from bullies. You always did take too much on yourself. Learned from the best. She laughed, but it turned into coughing. I waited while she fought for breath, listened to monitors beeping in the background, some nurse asking if she needed anything. I'm proud of you, she said finally. Whatever this job is, if you say it's important, then it's important. You found your purpose. Purpose. I looked at the mason jar of iron filings under the counter, at the ledger with its missing warnings, at the entities going through their eternal routines. Some purpose. Get some rest, Ma. You too. Love you. Love you too. I hung up before she could hear my voice crack. The children between machines 4 and 5 watched me with their marble eyes, heads tilted at identical angles. The Catholic schoolgirl mouthed something, probably free wash, but no sound came out. They only spoke when invited, another rule I'd learned the hard way. I headed to the break room, mechanically going through the motions of making coffee. Finn had needed it hourly to maintain focus, to keep himself anchored between living and dying. I didn't need it for that. I was still fully alive, fully human, but the routine helped. Measure grounds, add water, press the button, wait for the drip. The supply closet door rattled, just once, like something testing it from inside. Another thing to add to my mental list. Check the lock between midnight and dawn. Make sure whatever Jerry kept in there stayed in there. The ledger might have told me what it was before the pages disappeared. I carried the coffee to the back office out of habit. The monitors showed their angles of the laundromat, the thin man folding himself into a chair, 2 new figures approaching the front door, something wet and dark pooling under machine 6. Normal night shift stuff now. I'd keep the monitors running, keep making hourly coffee, keep pretending someone might drink it. 7 months later, I still made that coffee every hour, still carried it to the empty office, still checked monitors that showed me things I'd learned not to question. My mother died on a Tuesday. I couldn't leave for the funeral. Some responsibilities went beyond personal sacrifice. Some cages you locked yourself inside to keep the world safe from what wanted out. I understood that now, understood why Jerry's hands shook, why Finn had seemed relieved when his contract ended. I settled into the chair behind the counter, watching the entities pursue their routines. The washing machines hummed their mechanical prayers. The iron filings held their barriers. And somewhere outside, Mackenzie waited with her growing collection of the lost and damaged, testing the boundaries I maintained. This was my purpose now, every night, forever, making sure the doors stayed guarded and the wrong thing stayed contained, making sure what I'd released that one morning never got that chance again. The machines churned on around me, washing clothes that would never come clean,